We explored the political donation data that was posted on the announcements page of the course Blackboard. And these data show the PACs and corporations who made donations last year to the 148 House representatives who objected to the electoral vote. And our goal was simply to get an idea of what this sort of donor network looks like up close. So we started by loading the data into a pandas data frame, which gave us almost 2,700 rows, and each row represents a single donation from one PAC to one House representative. As far as the total dollar amounts of each of these donations, they range from $10,000 to $30,000, which is a similar enough scale that we're not going to focus on that going forward here. In terms of the summary statistics for the graph, there are 712 nodes. 148 of those are the congressmen, and the balance are the donors to them. So there's about 4 times as many donors as recipients. And the average degree for these nodes is 7.5 donations. The graph is not connected as is. There are 2 subcomponents, and one of them has only 2, so we can safely remove that and focus on the bigger one. And this is what that bigger one looks like using network X's plotting library. And of course, it's a highly connected cluster at the middle. But what's interesting is that over half of the donors, which are these violet nodes, are only donating to 1 or sometimes 2 congressmen. So these are special interest groups or just groups that are donating to their local congressman. And we'll remove those in a minute just to consider them less important players in the network. And we'll get a better idea of what the inside looks like at that point. But before we do that, we're going to look at the same graph in PyViz, which gives you a chance to zoom in a little bit and see what's going on. So it looks familiar from the above graph, and it's got these same violet nodes, individuals out on the edge. But in the middle here, we can see who these brighter, bigger nodes are. For example, this one right here, this is Kevin McCarthy, who is the House Minority Leader. So he's getting a huge amount of donations and over 100, I think 120 different entities donated to him. And the other bigger, brighter nodes here, we have Steve Scalise, who is the House Minority Whip, so number 2 in charge for this group. Down here we have this Blaine Luetkemeyer of Missouri, also very important in the network. And in terms of the PACs that are donating here, this one looks like the biggest one right here. Let's go see who this is. This is the Majority Committee PAC, and they donate to over 100 different congressmen as well. They're sort of a central one-stop shop place for people who want to just donate to these representatives, but not any one of them in particular. So we'll move on now to see what this thing looks like after we remove those isolated outer nodes, which turn out to be over half of the PACs are only donating to 1 or 2 nodes. So we can get a slightly clearer view when we remove those, and this is what we're left with. Still a highly, highly densely connected network, but now we see it's a little more balanced between the violets and the greens, and we get a slightly better view of what it looks like. But again, it's just super connected, and we're going to try to use some numbers here to see who's most central in that big jumble. The diameter was 6 before we removed the outer nodes, and now it's down to 5. And we looked at the top 10 of each of 3 centrality scores: degree centrality, closeness centrality, and betweenness centrality. And what we saw is the same big names emerge, the ones that we just zoomed in on that PyViz graph: Kevin McCarthy, Steve Scalise, and then that super PAC. They're going to be at the top of all these centrality scores. And when we add up all those 3 measures and just sum things up with one centrality score, we see that the super PAC is the most central, followed by the House Majority, House Minority, and House Whip, Kevin McCarthy and Steve Scalise. And then the third name, the third representative in this group is Elise Stefanik. And she was not third in power in this group as of these donations, but she actually, as of a couple weeks ago, I think, she got voted into that spot. And they removed someone who did not object to the electoral process, who was Liz Cheney. And so this group is very tightly knit ideologically, and the money definitely led the way for the vote of Elise Stefanik into the third position in power. There's over 12 degrees is the average for this resulting tight-knit group. And here's how those degrees are distributed. Just a couple out here. Those top two names that we saw are out at 120 degrees, but the rest of them are in a pretty smooth distribution. So one last thing we did was we made a graph bipartite, just to see if we could see any new interesting relationships emerge. And so half these nodes are going to be PACs and half of them are going to be the representatives. And we projected the bipartite graph onto the representatives with thicker edges for more PACs that we're donating to them in common. And this is what it looks like here. We got the same names down here with the thicker edges connected, and those same big names are being supported by a large number of PACs. But what was interesting in this is we colored the nodes by the betweenness centrality, and a name popped up that wasn't anywhere near the top of the list earlier, but is now the darkest node by far, is Bill Posey, the representative from Florida. And one possible interpretation of that is that he maybe represents a central ideological stance amongst this group, where he is more important in terms of connecting them all together than he would have been just by the measures that we looked at earlier. Whereas the Kevin McCarthy and Steve Scalise are now much lighter nodes. So although they are receiving the most donations and connected to the most common number of PACs, they actually aren't as central in this overall graph. That's it. Thank you.